This year, the sanitation district staff took a very, very different approach than they did last time. And we're really happy for it. It really worked out well. So this time, they were going to hold informational meetings, and myself and Joe and Spence showed up at the first one on March the 23rd at 7 p.m. That was the first one in our city hall. And at that time, you know, we as usual, I know you don't find this as a surprise, we're asking a ton of questions. And they issued us a challenge. And the challenge was, if they could provide sufficient information to convince us that their rate increases were justified, would we support their proposal? And we said, sure. You know, we answered in the affirmative. If you can convince us that you've got the real story, absolutely we'll support you. So give it your best shot. Let's go for it. And so we asked a ton of questions at that first informational meeting. And they came back on March 29th at 1 p.m. And I went back, and I was very, very pleasantly surprised because they returned with a whole bunch of answers. And they returned with one of the gentlemen from the finance department. And this chart basically tells almost the whole story about user rates here in Santa Clarita. So what you see here by this red line that goes up here is the rates. This is the current rates to about here, and this is where they want a whole bunch of increases. Notice how steep that line is. I guess that's brown. That line right here is that is what they call their normal inflation rate. Not necessarily the CPI. It's what they consider their normal inflation rate. And this yellow line here is a bump in cost caused by something that happened in 2003. And so this is a very interesting story, and we're going to break it down a little bit. At the beginning, from about the beginning of time when they wanted to chart it out through 2003, fees were held artificially low. And they were held artificially low because they had a large cash reserve and they were obtaining some grants. And rather than banking it, they decided that they would just hold the rates down and they would ask for no increases. Well, in 2003, the Regional Water Board, those same people that bring you the chloride issue, came into Santa Clarita and they said, we're going to impose a mandate to remove nitrates. And when they decided to make that requirement, our council, not our council, but our local board complied. They decided that they would just go ahead and implement this mandate. And to me, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do because it's totally unfunded. Not only did they decide to go do this unfunded, they decided not to pick the rates up to what the actual costs were at that time. I asked them, did you guys actually come out here and tell anybody you were doing this? Were we really told that you were going to increase your costs by 25%? And they insisted that they did. I personally was not aware of it, but you know what? Before last year, I don't think many of us were that well informed about what the Sand District was doing, except for maybe Mr. and Mrs. Dunn in there. So anyway, that mandate, which our Sanitation District Board decided to comply with, bumped our costs up 25%. But the rates still maintained low, and one of the guys that were there was very proud of the fact that they were able to hold the rates low because he had come up with a grant that allowed him to obtain the required filters and some of the other consumables. So we really didn't have to charge what it actually cost during that period. But you know, there's always a come to Jesus day. There's always the day when it all catches up to you. And that's exactly what happened. So the grants and the savings are running out. And now all of a sudden they realize that, by God, they're going to have to ramp these savings up, these costs up at a much higher rate because their cash reserve is now depleted. They can't find any more grants. Somebody's going to have to pay the actual cost of what it costs. And then, at some time, when it actually ends up where the costs and the revenues collide, that they would then be able to level off. You can see this thing levels off at the top, and the increases should track inflation. So that was a very interesting story, very different than what we were told last time, but I thought much more insightful. So if you look at that sanitation district presentation also, we talked about connection fees. Connection fees were not quite as well defined, and they had a chart showing that the expansion fund, the way the sanitation district works is they are supposed to collect connection fees before you need to expand, and then use that money to expand the water treatment plants. Well, as it turns out, that chart shows the expansion fund is being depleted by debt service. They're having to pay off debt, which is a really interesting question. And if we didn't increase the fees for the connection fees, well, then that fund would go to zero. And what also is interesting is that if you look at the projections that they showed for population growth and for increases in usage in the water treatment plant, they're going to have to expand their plant in 2020. That's when the line crosses the capability of the current plants. So the estimate of increasing, then they had an estimate and said, you know what, we want to increase these fees at an average of $5,000 per new user. And if you do that at an average of $5,000 per new user, based upon the projected number of increased users, you're going to collect another $160 million between now and 2020. So we had some questions. If the expansion fund collects revenue prior to need, why are we paying off debt? And as it turns out, the answer, which I didn't like at all, was that in the past, they found that there was a very inexpensive way to borrow money. So rather than collect sufficient money to build the expansion, they borrowed it instead. And so now, not only are we going to get to pay off a little bit of what we need to in the future, we're going to pay off a little bit of what was caused in the past. And my other question was, is $160 million the right number? How much is it going to cost you to increase the size of this plant? And how much is it going to cost you to pay off the rest of the debt service? And we never did get a good answer to that. Well, we went to the public hearing on April the 14th, and I kind of went with three thrusts. The first one was to support the user rate increase is justified. Doesn't mean I like it. Doesn't mean I think it was the right thing to do. Indicated I was displeased with the issue related to the board accepting unfunded mandates. But based upon what they had already done, and based upon the equipment that they already have in place, that they did really justify those rates. And being a man of my word, they provided the data. I supported them. But I did question the connection fees. And I questioned them with those two questions. Why are we paying off debt? And is $160 million the correct number? And we never really did get a good answer. Lastly, I expressed the opinion that the chloride issue can't be separated in total from expansion of our water reclamation plants. That the chloride issue is related to our user expansion, and the discussion can't be separate, because the more we increase the user base, the more it's going to cost to remove chloride. And so one suggestion that I offered was, why don't we just take the take the amount of water we dump back into the river, the treated water, down to the minimum required by the Regional Water Board based upon the Clean Water Act, and then spend that same amount of money instead of building additional chloride removal plants. Let's spend that money building a facility so that we can take that water back into the community and use it for residential and commercial irrigation, and therefore actually get something for our money instead of spending $500 million or $210 million and cleaning water just to throw it away. So that was, they thought about it a little bit, but of course we got a lot of answers of why that's not possible. And one being that they don't know what the Regional Water Board is going to do next, or whether they're going to impose more requirements on water even if we don't put it in the river. And to be honest with you, it was a suggestion, and I hope they consider it. Anyway, the Sanitation Board action, the chair this year was Mike Antonovich with members West and McLean. They approved the user fee increases, which are going to increase in increments over the next 2 years, 215, 231, 247. And they also approved the connection fee increases, and they reduced them a little bit from what they were, what the sanitation district was asking for initially, to $4,200, $5,000, and $5,500. But in actuality, there was no discussion at all about whether that was the right number. But remember, guys, this isn't over. Not over in the least. To put it in the sanitation district's own words, and also in our sanitation board's own words, none of the proposed rate increases is being budgeted for the development of facilities to remove chloride. Any rate increase that may be necessary to support a chloride solution will be proposed at a later date. Translation, you're going to be back for more money. And realize that if it's a $210 million solution, it doubles your rate. Okay? So we need to continually resist unfunded mandates. And fortunately, I think that that's a little bit of a feeling and a sense that's going through the state government as well. So are there any questions? Yes, sir.
At that April 14 meeting, they didn't answer my question when they were asking for so many million for new plants. And new plants are usually a capital program. They're not out of operation and management funds. All the different water agencies the same way. They wouldn't answer that.
Well,
We need a new plant. If we need it for growth, the existing user doesn't pay for that.
well, that's what the connection fees are supposed to fund.
Right.
But you're right.
The rates.
But
See, you don't put capital in the rates. Operation and maintenance is for standard operation and maintenance. The salaries, the electrical power, the chemicals, all that. That's operation and maintenance. You don't take new buildings out of that fund. It comes out as a capital fund. And that's where the connection fee should go, as a capital fund. They won't explain why they're increasing operation and maintenance so high to build a new plant.
well, they told us that the user fee increase is to support O&M. The connection fee increase, or the connection fee fund, is to fund larger plants or additional plants. That's what we were told.
But they do say right in their black and white print.
They did not.
Millions for a new plant in the O&M rate.
I thought that they had said that new plants would not be built in the OEM rate.
The other thing that came out recently before that meeting, remember in that meeting they made it clear, had nothing to do with the chloride, it just had to do with our sanitation plant. The other thing that happened just before that meeting is that we found out the new Ranch project was supposed to build its own sanitation plant. Now it's not doing that, and there's going to be a pipeline from New Home Ranch all the way up to our plant, and that they happen to have 6,000 home capacity at our sanitation district to take those 6,000 homes. Now, why are they raising our rates if they already got a plant that will take 6,000 more homes? And where did the funds come from to build a plant that will service 6,000 more homes? You cannot trust these people at all. They're not working for us.
Well, we asked that question, and we also got an answer at the second meeting. We asked a question about the 6,000 users, 6,000 supposedly temporary users that would be added to our reclamation plant. The answer that we got from them at the second meeting was that the 6,000 users will pay a connection fee, and they will pay a surcharge, and it will not be a permanent connection. The question that they didn't answer was, how long would they be connected? That's the question they didn't answer. But they will pay connection fees, they will pay the same rates, and they will pay a surcharge for hooking up.
Right, but they're not telling us where the funding came to fill the capacity that's already there for 6,000 homes. They're not telling where the funding came from. They're telling you they're short on funds. How could they be short on funds and they built themselves a new plant? Where'd those funds come from?
Well,
They come from the existing users.
Well, I think we're mixing it up now. The new plant comes from New Hall Ranch.
No, it's already there. They have the 6,000 home capacity it exists. They're just gonna hook New Oil Ranch to it. And I'll bet you that once that New Oil Ranch pipe's hooked in there, New Oil Ranch is never gonna build a plant.
Well, there is a chart. I have the video of it, so I can show you the chart. There is a chart that shows the projected increase and the projection of when the plant has to be expanded, and it also shows the number of connections between now and in 2020. Far more than 600. Far more than 6,000. So they do not have to expand their plant to take on 6,000 as long as they don't do it permanently. There'll be a time when those 6,000 users will create that demand, but not within the next couple of years. But again, like I said, 2020, if the projections are right, without the 6,000 users, they have to expand. And so I can show you those charts.
Yeah, the state has a restraint on most special district governments, which they are, just like our wholesale water agency and our New York County Water District. They have a constraint on those districts, those special governments, that they cannot build anything that is growth inducing. And anything you build as growth inducing is you're building it ahead of time, and then the growth might as well come along because you already have it.
Well, that's a different question.
That expansion that exists right now in that sanitation district that they built is in violation of the state rules about growth inducement.
Well, that's a different question. We didn't ask that question. But we did ask the question about whether $160 million was the right number, and we really didn't get an answer. So we'll go pursue that some more, and I'll ask him the question about gross inducement as well.
Yeah, and why a new plant? The existing user doesn't need a new plant.
Okay.
But they want to put it in the rates.
Any other questions? All right. Let's just go.